Welcome, everybody, to the latest edition of the Union Federation podcast here on the Fandom Podcast Network. Of course, this is the show we discuss all things Star Trek and the Orville. And if you thought we had a huge show last week, we got an even bigger one this week, as we're going to be talking about, of course, the latest episode of Picard and the season finale of Discovery Season 4. But I can't talk about those things without a top-notch crew. And of course, that leads me into bringing in our first officer, our counselor. She's also the co-host of Galaxy Classy Star Trek The Next Generation podcast, as well as All Good Things, a Star Trek universe podcast. She's our favorite counselor. She's our favorite holographic captain, Miss Amy Nelson.
Well, hello. What an amazing welcome.
Well, you're still on a cruise high, so
I really am. Yes.
yes. So we still have more stories we're going to get out of you. It isn't like Vegas. They don't stay on the cruise, Amy.
They don't. They keep on showing up in social media.
Yep. But again, having a top-notch crew means we have to fill all the positions here on the crew, and that includes a top-notch science officer as well as a sharpshooter with the phasers. Of course, I'm talking about the ever-lovely Hayley Stoddart.
Hello. I am glad to be here. Although I've been relocated for some reason, and I'm not sure if I like the new digs people.
Yeah. Could you have been taken over by a smaller alien race this weekend, Hayley?
Maybe. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, that's
Tribbles
the rumors.
were involved. It was an ugly mess.
Yeah, I've got a couple of legged tribbles over around me right now. They might pop on screen while we're doing this podcast, but they've missed me, so I kind of have to abide by them a little bit. But speaking of abide by, we have to have a top-notch security officer to make sure everybody follows the rules, and he's had a very special assignment this week. So let me bring him on, Mr. Kevin Reitzel.
Hey, good to be back. Good to be back talking some Star Trek. I'm excited.
Now, Kevin, I sent you out on a special mission this week, and I can't remember. Did your mission, did you bring back a prisoner or did you bring back an ambassador?
I was going for an ambassador, might be an alien, I'm not sure, but we do have a very special guest for this week's episode of Union Federation. A friend of mine and also a fellow Highlander fan. I'd like to bring in Mr. John Mosby. This guy right here. Look at this handsome devil. What's up, John? How are you?
Not so bad. Clearly, I'm going for the more Patrick Stewart look more than the Riker look now. Clearly, but, Patrick Stewart and I come from the same part of England, so yes, definitely going for the Patrick Stewart look.
Well, it's good to have you. I know you through the Highlander universe. We'll touch on that in a second, but it's good to have you.
Good to be here.
As always, it's great to have our great crew. And John, it's always good to see you as well. Again, we are here to talk about the season finale of Star Trek Discovery Season 4 coming home, as well as Episode 3 of Season 2 of Picard Assimilation. But Kevin, before we do that, we do have a special guest here. Why don't you inform our listeners who may not be Highlander fans, and if so, I don't know, maybe we need to take their heads in the process, but who Mr. Mosby is, because he's been a long time resident around these Fandom Podcast Network parts.
Well, you got to have his book, and if you're a Highlander fan, he's the author of Fearful Symmetry, the essential guide to all things Highlander. And for Highlander fans, this is the Bible, covers everything. And John, you wrote this, and it's quite the Bible.
It is. I've been covering film, television, books for about 25, 30 years. And Highlander was my go-to. So everybody has their favorite fandom. And I loved it. And I realized after a time, people kept reminding me I had all these interviews, all these set visits, all these experiences, conventions and stuff. Why don't you do something with it rather than just the articles over the years? And I figured I better do it. So 2015, I spent about 6 months just before I moved to the States, collating everything, and Fearful Symmetry was the result. And it seems to have gone down pretty well.
Well, you also are a contributor to Echo Chamber, and I was wondering if you could just give us a little history on this.
Yeah, those who sort of have known me longer know that I used to edit a national magazine in the UK called Impact, for many years, and then that went online, Sign of the Times, and then the people who ran it sold the whole company, and after a while, that company went as well. So unfortunately, the Impact site went the way of not being assimilated and disappeared into the ether. So a group of us, 2 or 3 of us, decided that we still had the material, still had the interest in reviewing. And so Echo Chamber was born out of that. I do a lot of the reviews. Various people do some of the news. And yeah, it's really a way of keeping our head and hand in the heart in the game. And it's kind of fun to do. It's a labor of love rather than a finance. There's no money involved, but the joy of it is what keeps me going.
Well, it's good to have you here. And for those of you that are listening, if you happen to be a Highlander fan, please buy his book on Amazon, and please give it a review too. But it's everything that you need to know about Highlander. And, whenever there's this new movie that's supposed to be coming out, John, you're going to have to add another chapter to that.
Oh, special Zeist edition will be. Yeah, well, Renegade Zeist edition will be.
Well, with that, it's time to talk a little Trek, and we've got some Trek news to dive into first. And with this particular Trek news, it's involving Strange New Worlds, which means I got to hit up Hayley Stoddart first and foremost with this news, because James Tiberius Kirk, has been cast for season 2 of Strange New Worlds. He is to be played by Paul Wesley, probably most famous in the States in his role in the TV show Vampire Diaries. But we've seen a picture of him. We've seen him in the shirt. There's even an interesting story which Amy Nelson, I know you put up on your social media. But Hayley, I gotta get your first reactions to the fact we have Kirk now coming for season 2 of Strange New Worlds.
I get it, but also I'm a little disappointed because I really would rather Strange New Worlds be about Captain Pike and his crew and the adventures that they have before Kirk takes over the Enterprise as the captain. So it'll be kind of fun, but at the same time, I think we've gotten so much backstory because of the new films with young Kirk when he first becomes captain that do we really need to dive into it? No. Can't we just leave it to Captain Pike, please?
Just for those of you who might be new, Kaylee has no Captain Pike bias at all.
No, definitely not. Definitely not. No.
Amy, you posted a great thing on social media with Paul Wesley. He happened to be probably fated to play Kirk, according to this story he shared on social media.
Okay, you're gonna have to refresh my memory. It sounds so very familiar.
He was on an airplane and looked behind him, and William Shatner was on the plane behind him. He was just flying back from his SpaceX trip.
Yes, that's right. Oh my gosh. And how crazy is that? So he actually got to talk to him like Kirk to Kirk.
And this is actually before he had Kirk. So I'm thinking,
right.
Shatner probably gave him the little push over the edge there. So, but what do you think of this? What do you think about bringing in Kirk to Strange New Worlds?
I have been on record to say I'm not a fan of bringing in. I didn't want to really see Spock in Discovery. Yes, I said it because I'm like, look, we have enough Spocks. We're good. We're good. And I sort of do feel the same way because I need Anson Mount to shine. And Pike is an amazing character, which I'm really looking forward to, and his crew. But then again, every single Kirk that they brought in, I've really enjoyed. So,
Kevin, any thoughts on this?
I'm a little indifferent. I see why they do it because it brings that world, it connects the world a little bit. I'm hoping that he's not on for like the whole season. I just hope he kind of comes in and does a few things and then he's out. But Kirk's in that world and it makes sense, but I don't want him to overshadow that wonderful cast that we're going to see and that we got teased with in the last season of Discovery. But when I was looking him up, I'm like, he looks familiar. And I realized that my fiance, one of her guilty pleasure shows of all time is The Vampire Diaries. So she's a huge fan of Mr. Stefan Salvatore. And so I'm sure there's a lot of fans of the actor Paul Wesley.
John, what are your thoughts on this as well as your thoughts just on Strange New Worlds? Are you excited for it?
It looks great. It looks great. Yeah. It looks great as a concept and idea. If you told me that Anson Mount was going to be like the Captain Pike several years ago, I would have gone, "What, the guy from that Britney Spears film Crossroads? Him?" But he was very, very good, in Discovery. And yeah, I was thinking, okay, maybe back to basics, maybe a story of the week, and things like that. And I thought, yeah, he definitely was very good. Ethan Peck was very good as Spock. So as a concept, that I think the series, depending on how it's done, could be really, really good. But I am equally of the mind that however good it is and however interesting it might be to see Kirk, we don't need to know a year and a bit away that Kirk's coming into it. It smacks a little bit of what The Walking Dead's doing at the moment, which is saying, hey, in 2 years' time, we're going to have this series starring these people. And you're going, well, they're not going to die then. And it ruins, for the sake of a brief headline, I don't see any advantage at this point of announcing that Kirk is going to appear in it, other than that it was going to leak, which is sometimes the case. But yeah, I'm no interest really in seeing Kirk yet. No objection to him being in it, but let's get the first season out of the way, because I understand Kirk's appearing in some regard in season 2. Yeah, let's get season 1 out of the way first, and then let's see where it goes.
I agree with you, Hayley. I'm going to give you the final word on this, since it is Strange New Worlds.
Well, thank you. I have to say, Kevin, when you bring up that, Kirk is in this, is he really, though? Because Vulcans live a really long time. And yes, Kirk comes in, but Pike seems like he's older when we see the original series, if you watch The Cage.
Right.
So really, is Kirk even born yet? Or he's just like a wee little lad at this point? Like, really? He doesn't need to be in Strange New Worlds. Like, just... I'm fine.
I'm wondering if they're giving this a chance to kind of write a tiny footnote in Kirk's career prior to getting the Enterprise. That time that he spent, because, when you look at Star Trek 2009, there was still kind of a gap that they didn't touch on. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting.
Fair enough, but I don't know. I'm not for it.
Don't infringe on Captain Pike. That's what Hayley's telling us. But with that, it's time to get things going here. So let's engage that quantum drive and let's talk a little Star Trek Discovery.
We have a warning, though.
Oh, well, yes. Security. I know you're on top, not security officer. Come, give me a chance here. I get to hit the button here. Before we talk anything with Discovery, before we talk anything with Picard, it is time for, once again, to give you a proper... spoiler warning. We are going to be diving deep into both the season finale of Star Trek Discovery as well as the latest episode of Star Trek Picard on this episode. So if you haven't watched them yet, go watch them, come back, listen, watch the episode. We got a lot of thoughts on what's going on here, and we're going to have some great insights all the way across the board on both Discovery and Picard. But let's get into the season finale of Star Trek Discovery, Coming Home. We've been kicking off Picard the last couple of weeks, but this is the big one. This is the finale of season 4 of Discovery. It was a big episode. It's definitely had some interesting reactions on the net as well. So we were talking about, of course, episode 13, Coming Home, released on March 17th. Runtime a little over an hour. Amy Nelson, would you care to give us the latest addition into the captain's log for Star Trek Discovery?
I would love to. Tarka begins dismantling the power source's container, causing dangerous plasma bursts. Tarina learns that the minds of the 10C are connected, and they do not understand that Tarka is acting independently of Discovery. The crew sacrifices Discovery's spore drive to escape the orb, but are unable to approach Book's ship due to the plasma. Ndoye offers to make amends by ramming Book's ship with a shuttlecraft, killing Tarka. Ndoye and Reno are beamed to safety, but Book seemingly dies. The crew of Discovery meet members of 10C on a planet inside the hyperfield and explain that Tarka was working alone and why. The 10C turns off the DMA, sparing Earth and Navarre, and reveal that they saved Book as he appears in front of Michael and the crew. Discussing his grief and using his empathic abilities, Book convinces 10C to stop using the DMA altogether, take down the hyperfield, and start working with others to make amends for the harm caused by the DMA. The 10C uses a wormhole to send Discovery to Earth, which decides to rejoin the Federation. Book is punished by the Federation by sending him to an emergency center on Europa, where he will make amends by sending him to help families and others displaced and harmed by the actions of the DMA. Michael and Book then both confirm their love for each other. The rest of the Discovery crew, friends, and Federation members are seen preparing for a much-needed break, returning home after 930 years, and reuniting with their families and some building new relationships. Michael and the rest of the Federation dignitaries meet with the Madam President of the United Earth, who informs them they are ready to rejoin the Federation. Kwakoni Yikwan. The end.
Okay, so we're going to take a minute here. Let everybody give their initial first reactions to the episode before we go into a little bit of a deeper dive. Amy, I'm going to start with you for your first. What were your initial first reactions just as you were hitting those closing credits of this week's finale?
Okay, if you listened to me at all last week, I really enjoyed last week's episode. Super high, and I'm still riding the high. This episode got me in all the feels, and I do have some issues, but the overall Trekness of it, I was just so happy with. And I was happy that the 10C, and I think we talked about it like episode 3 or 4 of the season. And I'm like, I really want it where the 10C doesn't know what they're doing. It's benign and they communicate. And that is exactly what happened. Like, my wish came true. So for me, this overall is my favorite season. Ended fabulously with these last 2 episodes. I really, really enjoyed it.
Now, the truth is, Amy's math classes all this week were focused on the Star Trek Discovery. So
absolutely. Oh.
Kevin, what about you? What were your first reactions as we closed out this season of Discovery and this particular season finale?
The one thing that we had been talking about through this season was what we didn't want to see happen last season, where we feel like we get rushed and they just have to cram a bunch of stuff into this episode to kind of wrap it up. I didn't feel that was the case this time. I felt that they did a pretty good job of wrapping it up and, bringing Tilly back and stuff like that. And I think that, I didn't feel that rush. There was a few other things about it that I do have concerns about, but that was my biggest concern. And I was actually happy about that. I was happy that we didn't feel like, okay, we got to end this right now. I was actually very happy with the way they ended it. I just, when it comes to aesthetics a little bit and, how we were going to see the 10C and, it's Amy, it's funny you mentioned that what if they don't know that they're doing it? And it kind of reminds me of a couple of TNG episodes and some other Star Trek episodes where that's where you get that kind of like, well, maybe they're not trying to hurt us. They just don't realize it. And so I was happy with that as well.
Hayley, what about you?
No, I agree completely. I think the pacing of this episode, there was still kind of a sense of urgency and a lot that needed to happen, but they paced it so well that it didn't feel like, oh, in the last 5 minutes of the episode, everything was happening all at once. They took their time with it, which I think was probably a lesson learned from last season with the last final episode. So I thought that was wonderful. I really enjoyed this episode more than I did the previous episode. And I think it was really well done. It was really balanced. And, all the different things came together as a whole. And I think that really worked really well.
Now, John, we're going to get into a review here and that you wrote for Echo Chamber in just a minute. But I did want to ask you, what was your initial, just coming out, those closing credits hit? What kind of feeling did you have coming out of the finale?
I hate to be, the odd person out here. One of these things is not like the other. It's I really had a profound sense of disappointment. Now I'll expand on that in a bit, but it wasn't so much the episode per se. It was the fact that this was a 13 episode story, and for me, I sat there and the 13th episode going, okay, I think this story, if you took away some of the trimmings, could have been told in 2 or 3 episodes, maybe 4, certainly way less than half. And I knew after watching, I think some of the problems I had with the final episode were the setups in the penultimate episode, where you're going, okay, Star Trek's trying something a bit different here. How is it going to top and tail everything off, given that it's gone to something like Arrival, which is very the Arrival film, rather than the traditional kind of Trek and the foreheads, Close Encounters of the different foreheads. For me, I don't know what it was trying to say in the end. For me, I'm sorry, the final episode, it felt like 3 or 4 people were in a room and everybody had profoundly different ideas of what they wanted the finale to be, and everybody got 10 minutes. And for me, it was a checklist, and and I know we'll be talking about Picard soon, but when you watch this and Picard on the same day, for me, it just throws a series like Discovery that I really wanted to like into sharp relief. Everything Picard's doing right for me, Discovery's doing wrong. And it's a shame because there's so many talented people involved and there's so many good ideas sprinkled in. But 13 episodes to get to that, no, that I feel like my chain's been yanked a bit.
You bring up a point about 13 episodes. I want to get to you when we talk about your review on Echo Chamber, John, because I have a thought on that. I want to get your opinion on. For me, with this episode, there was a lot of things I liked about this episode. It's something it seems like in these last few episodes, Discovery is kind of learning a little bit, is giving everybody besides Burnham and Book some spotlight here, and I think they did a very good job of that in this finale. And I'm hoping this is going to be a continuing trend, but we'll see. I do like the fact that there wasn't per se the bad guy. Yes, Tarka was probably the closest thing to a bad guy, but even then he was dealing with emotional grief. And I think that was kind of one of the points they had for this whole season. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. I think for me, one of the problems I had with this season was that it had that Disney-esque ending. Like it felt like where there could have been some very heavy consequences for people, and they just took the kind of the Disney way out. Book was saved because they felt his transporter beacon signal was very important. He does all these things. Did his sentence get off a little late? We're going to talk about that in some away missions. But it felt like there should have been, for what could have been more jeopardy to members of our cast, it was downplayed. Even the general who they say it's a suicide mission, yet she survives it. So I felt like they tried to put weight on things, but then they kind of Disney-fied their way out, and the ending felt like it was a little bit like, oh, everything just worked out absolutely perfect. And the other thing I think too, and I'm curious if you guys think this too, this ending felt like it was a series finale. Like they didn't know they were going to get a season 5 or not at the time they filmed this, and this very much felt like it could have been this series finale of Discovery. But that might be just me. However, we do have a lot of away missions to discuss, including a very special one this week. So without further ado, let's teleport into our away missions. Now, Kevin, this was all part of your special mission that I talked about at the beginning of the show. So why don't you take us into this very special away mission?
I wanted to, first of all, get our guest John on. John, you do a lot of episode and television and entertainment reviews for the Echo Chamber, and you've been covering Star Trek. And, when you were just discussing your, I guess, disappointment for the season finale, you're not alone. There's people that feel the same way you do, and there's people that don't. Discovery has been very decisive that way. And I have had my frustrations with the show that I've discussed on Union Federation. And this article that you wrote touches on several of those things that I felt as well. But I wanted you to kind of expand on it a little bit more, and kind of give your feeling of, because I think the point that you made about the season and how you felt about how it was paced, because I made a point last week that when I was reading another review and I was agreeing with it, that it feels like you can watch the first 2 episodes of the season and then the last 2, and you just get like a little 4-part miniseries. This show has a different formula, and it's not sitting with a lot of Trek fans, I guess, is my point. And I want to know, and I know Amy and I have gone back and forth about it, that we have to kind of accept that this has took a different direction, and that we need to be open to that. But from what I'm getting from your article here, though, that is that you obviously feel different about that.
Well, I mean, I think there's perfectly good room for a show that does episodic story of the week with a maybe background arc, the way a lot of classic TV shows did. And there's also a completely legitimate way of doing episodic TV. Of doing a continuity and a long story. And there's going to be some padding in there. The 22 episodes that used to be the original format, less and less so now. Even on the very best shows that we know and love from the 90s and the noughties, there would be a handful of shows over the 22 episodes that were filler. That's fine. You nowadays have a lot of shows that are between 10 and 13 episodes. So you would expect there to be less filler. But I mean, you pointed out, you could basically select half the episodes, maybe much less than half the episodes, and still tell pretty much the same story. I think that's the thing that gets me. I have no problem with a story arc. I have no problem with a bit of filler, as long as the filler is interesting. But if you've got that sense of, oh my God, we're against the clock, we've got to do something. Oh look, there's a pretty flower. Let's just gonna have a look at this for a little while. It's got to be a very interesting flower, to look at along the way. And we kept having stories that felt like filler, and filler shouldn't. We might know it's filler. It might not progress the season story arc that much, but it shouldn't feel while we're watching it that it's been a deliberate obstacle to delaying it. And I just don't think there was enough story in the season to warrant 13 episodes, which meant that every 3rd episode I was sitting there going, oh, well, that was a funny line. I like that thing, that aspect. But there was not enough in the episodes to make me feel that this was something that I should be invested in for 13 episodes. And every week there was something funny. There would be a scene that I liked, a performance that I liked, an element of the story that I liked, but not enough. Again, when you watch something like, we'll get onto it, like the Picard, where so far 3 episodes in, it's not wasting a single beat. This felt like, and it's a problem I've had with Discovery a little bit, that it doesn't. It's perfectly all right to have a new feel or a new vibe, but I've never felt that it has confidence in itself. It changes from season to season, quite dramatically in some ways, and hardly remotely in others. It's almost like, oh, we've gone, vastly into the future, but we're still going to tell pretty much the same story arc or the same storylines. It's never felt to me like you could come in on any season and it's almost like a brand new show. That's great. That brings in new people who don't worried by too much continuity. But to what you were saying before, it almost feels like studio notes have been made to dilute everything. So again, we have no real deaths in the finale. There's no real. The high stakes are all artificial. My favorite moments are all the smaller character moments. Saru and things like that. And Tig Notara, who just steals every scene she's in. I love. I'm not. I don't come here to slay this series. I wanted it to be good, but the worst thing is I got bored for over 13 episodes, and there wasn't enough in the 13th episode for me to go, oh, I'm so glad I stayed here. It was fine. The last hour was fine, but it wasn't fine enough for me.
It's interesting when you mentioned how the seasons changed drastically, and that was something that caught me off guard because it reminds me of this new type of storytelling in shows. A good example is American Horror Story, where you have the same cast members, but then it's an anthology series where you take them out of their last setting and put them in something completely different. And in a way it works, and in a way it doesn't, and it can be jarring to fans. And I see your point there. It feels like, that you have these wonderful actors playing these wonderful roles, and there's these great moments between them. And that it almost feels like there's a sandbox that is built, but like, they go in, and they kind of go in and kind of go out. And then you have this overarching threat that they have to deal with. So I see where you're coming from. Amy, I wanted to give you a chance to kind of give your opinion on that and what John's comments were.
Well, I wanted actually to talk about what Kyle said with that Disney ending. I do agree. And because that was the one thing that I felt manipulated with, because losing Book and seeing the incredible, amazing performance by
I thought he was dead.
Green.
Yeah, he was.
Oh,
I was going through that with her. Like I was in tears. I was going through that. And mind you, just the other week, I was on the ship with Sonequa Martin Green, and I learned who she was. And I felt like this was the very first time in 4 seasons that I actually saw Sonequa in Michael. That scene was so powerful. And I'm like, he is dead. And then it's like he's Black Jesus coming down for the resurrection. I love it. This ball of light coming down, landing on the bridge right in the middle. Really? You didn't have to bring him back, because I was so sad that he was gone. And then you bring him back. So all of that was just a manipulation of my feelings. And I didn't appreciate, oh, he is so handsome. But I didn't appreciate that. Yeah, let's tie it up. Oh, the 10C saved him. I do like that reasoning, but no, he could have been gone. And then that would have given the gravity that I think you guys were talking about. I felt like with the 10C not knowing, and that it was in the end harmless. I feel like when people say, well, there was no teeth. Well, that's because they're harmless. Like, we had the fear of the 10C for all this time. So I feel like that criticism could be tampered with a little bit, because communication, like what this whole season was about, goes back to the core of Star Trek. What is the motion picture about? Earth is in danger because there's some big cloud that's approaching it, and they go in the center to try and communicate with it. That's what this season is about. And then to add the grief and the loss with it, and then the math. Well, we all know where I stand with that. And I feel like also the comment with you're saying it could have been done in less episodes. I've been covering Discovery, podcasting about Discovery since its beginning. I literally remember saying in season 1 and in season 2, I feel like a fire hose is at me with all of this story and telling me, and right? And now we get a season where we get to take our time. We are developing characters. We do have some moments with the bridge crew where they get their own little episode with on and away team. Like, we get the time that's rushed. And so I'm like, you can't have it both ways, or maybe you can, but I'm enjoying this length, this structure, this time to breathe, where it's like, oh, everyone can have their moment. And so, although there are some things that are an issue, and another issue, I have decided after 4 seasons, I don't like this director. Sorry, Olatunde. the choices that he made between the scene cuts, I got irritated with, and like the angles, and I'm just like, oh. So I realized I don't like the director, but I'm going to overlook that because I liked what else they did.
Gotcha.
I want to hop in here real quick because Amy brings up a point, and it's something I want to ask John too, because you're talking about when John talked about the filler episodes. I got to be honest, I had literally forgotten about Tilly and the cadets. It just kind of blanked my mind until they showed up in the finale again. I was like, oh yeah, that's right. So I think there has been some filler episodes that were kind of did take you out of the story. And I think, so I see where John is coming from. And I agree. I think, John, and this is my question for you on this too, is to me, it's the biggest fault Discovery has had since it started. It's like the writers can't figure out how to write a 13 episode season. It's either everything is just coming at you so fast, like Amy talked about, coming out of the fire hose, or here they dialed it back, but they almost dialed it back too much. They can't seem to find that happy medium. And what I'm wondering, John, is because I've been following the streaming and digital and everything like that, where things have changed to more of a shorter season here for the writers in the States, and compared to what you've had over in British television for so long. Do you think that's a big part of it? The writers are having a hard time adjusting to this new medium of 13 episodes instead of either 22 or a shorter, like 6-episode miniseries?
I think that's definitely it. I mean, it's been a subtle change over the last decade, I think, but we're getting more used to binge watching shows, everything being available at one go, shorter seasons, exactly what you've said. This probably does feel a little bit more sort of halfway back to what we got in the 90s and the noughties. It feels like somebody has said, here's what I want to do, and then so many studio notes have come through or things have changed, and it almost feels like somebody had a plan and it got diced and sliced and edited into something else, a bit like the recent season of Doctor Who was, where you feel like there was probably a really good idea, some really good talent, but it just, for me, it didn't work. The pacing of the final episode, I was nearly throwing stuff through the TV screen with the amount of reaction shots. You know, you would have the camera panning and people going. And when it was, I was still convinced I had to, would have to watch it again to see if somebody was replaying exactly the same footage every 5 minutes, like on the planet. I was seeing all the supporting cast who casual viewers probably would go, oh yeah, I think they're on the bridge crew, and sort of just nodding as if they're contractually bound to have a few more seconds of screen time. That's I just got there are. I know it's a different type of show. I know it's not an ensemble show in some respects, but when you're getting 4 seasons in and you are not developing some of the regular sort of supporting cast, the bridge crew, and yet every other week you're bringing in new characters and giving them some good lines, it feels like people don't quite know what they want to do. And that's what I keep coming back to all the way through the season. Yes, there's a lot of talent involved. Yes, there's good performances. Yes, there's some sparkling dark dialogue. But it just feels like people are marking time. It feels sometimes like a checklist. You said, I don't like knocking the show because I know there's a lot of talent involved and nobody sets out to make something that's not great. But I just felt it plodded, and I don't even mean plodding along as in slow. I mean uneven. It was more like, okay, with this character, and maybe it was COVID that contributed, to some of that being askew. But suddenly you would have characters, like Tilly going, "Yeah, I'm out of here." What? Okay, we've had a few things about her being dissatisfied, but that's gone. Several other characters just disappearing or not hardly been in there at all. It felt like people being moved around because we need to tell a different story, rather than that organic side where if somebody is going to leave or somebody's going to take up a new position, that there is something more than an episode that leads up to it. It feels like characters are being moved around without that kind of organic feel to it. We need them to be over there. We don't need Tilly for a while. Okay, so she's going to go off there. It didn't feel to me very cohesive. I keep using the term in my reviews, connective tissue. And that's what I feel it keeps missing from Discovery, which is those bits that hold the things together. This scene is good. This scene is good. But the connective tissue, it breaks apart. It makes the either isn't the consequence, or we're dealing with massive consequences and then forgetting it next. I don't. For me, it just didn't feel like a whole thing together. It felt like little bits here and there, and that's after a whole season of that, or 13 episodes. It just felt there's so much competition. I want of shows that are doing it better that I don't know why this show isn't.
Okay. That's a good point, Sean. And what we've talked about is, so I'm kind of leading this into one of the other questions I had here. I think John and Amy put up their points very well. So I'm going to ask Hayley this: what were your overall thoughts of the season? And Hayley, I mean, do you feel like a lot of the points that we've just talked about are kind of defining of this season, or do you have some other insight?
No, I definitely agree. It's kind of a situation where there's too many hands in the pot, and they're also trying to merge what used to be like an A story and a B story in like TNG, Deep Space Nine, Voyager kind of stuff like that. They're trying to mesh it together. And because there's maybe too many hands in the pot, they don't quite know how to do that. And so that's kind of where I'm coming from. I mean, there's definitely, I think, in this season versus last season, for me, there's been some episodes that have done a lot better. I think this, scary overarching story was better compared to, oh my gosh, there's no dilithium. What do we do? And that, I feel like that story was so much better than in this season with this mining. And like you guys said, I was of the mindset that the 10C didn't know what their mining device was doing. They had no idea that it was destroying these other worlds because they had isolated themselves. And so to a degree, I think there's some stuff there that was really great, but I feel like you guys, that really I could enjoy this so much more if there were less hands in the pot, because you throw in so many people with ideas. Yeah, that's great, but it's like they're trying to do justice and give everybody their idea in each episode and through the story, that it just becomes too convoluted to keep track of everything. And then there's so much stuff that's still just really one note. Either everybody's really sad, or everybody's really happy and excited, or they're all really scared. And to a degree, like, other people can have emotions too, but like everybody's almost feeling all the same stuff in each episode. And that's disappointing, because that's not the case. Not everybody's going to feel that way. Yeah.
There's a couple other quick pointers, talking points. I just real quick answers on, guys, that I want to hit up. First and foremost, I want to ask each of you guys. We talked about this real quickly, and so I'm going to just give me your quick thought. Was there a true villain this season, Kevin?
It was building up to be, and that was one of my complaints going towards the end of the season, was I wasn't sure who it was. It's not the Emerald Chain, it's and such, but to me, it turned into kind of a flip-flop of, I'm trying to remember the name of the TNG episode with the nanites that were live creatures, and that we had looked at them as not important beings enough to look or care for. And I felt like they kind of switched the script on that, where the 10C was kind of like not looking at looking at the consequences of what they were doing to all of the other living beings and such. So I mean, I could joke and say that the real villain was the person who came up with the main concept of this, and not getting enough people, or not working on refining the story a little bit more. But when it comes down to it, I mean, I guess you could say Tarka was the villain. But that, for me, didn't pay off as well. Just my opinion.
Hayley, what about you? Do you think there was a true villain this season?
No, and I don't think that there has to be. I mean, Star Trek, there were villains in episodes, but it wasn't like, and granted, I mean, even in Deep Space Nine, I mean, yes, we kind of had the villains, but it switched up, here and there. And it really wasn't that there was a villain. It was just that people were trying to do what they thought was right. And does that necessarily make them a villain? No. And so I don't think there was a villain, and I don't think there has to be. Like, there doesn't have to be a bad guy. There doesn't have to be an adversary, because it's Star Trek and it's exploration, and you might run into people that, you can't communicate with or have some differences with, but that doesn't mean that one of you's the villain and one of you isn't.
How about you? Did you think there was a villain in this story?
Sorry, me.
Yeah.
I got the feeling that firstly, I agree there doesn't have to be a mustache twirling villain or the Borg or anything to make to be the villain of the piece. It can be somebody who's misunderstood. The best villains, as I think plenty of people who played villains have said, is the villain's got to think that what he's doing is right. He can't be tying people to metaphorical rail tracks just for the thrill of it. There's got to be some reason to it. And Taka had the potential to be a character that fit into that really well. But I almost got the feeling that from episode to episode, the writers didn't quite were on the same page. Is he a bad guy? Is he just a guy that's hard to like, but and he's one of those characters that could become a classic character? Is he a complete rotter? Is he whatever? And it felt from week to week that it wasn't just that we weren't being completely led in. It almost felt like the writing was sympathetic one week, not sympathetic the other. And that when we got to the finale, it was more like having your cake and eat it. Yes, he's now become almost the mustache twirling villain, but we're not going to quite kill him either because we're still a little bit sympathetic to him. And we're not going to have the 10C be the bad guys. They're misunderstood as well, though I still think the kind of smelly vision aspect got diluted quite metaphorically and literally in the finale. So it doesn't have to be a bad guy, but you've got to make the pseudo bad guy interesting. And for me, we had the episode of his backstory, and then it was back to him being a bit of a swine again. Not enough. Again, would work maybe if you had 3 or 4 episodes to tell it, but didn't feel like everybody was on the same page as who they wanted the villain, if there was going to be a villain, to be.
Amy, I'm going to get to you in just a second because I have something else I want to add on to the question for you. But to me, the villain for this season is ignorance. Whether it's the 10C's ignorance of what the DMZ was doing, the ignorance of the Federation and with how it handled some of its relationships with people who weren't part of the Federation, and just the crew's ignorance almost with each other to truly try to get a grip on what everybody was feeling. Because this season dealt with everybody and their emotions, and people maybe not understanding their emotions, whether it was Kolber, whether it was Stamets, whether it was Zora even. We had that whole subplot in this season as well. So it just felt like it was trying to get over your ignorance and observe the situation around you and observe the emotions of the people around you. So I think to me, that was kind of how I saw the villain of the season going around. Amy, I want to ask you the same question, but I want to add something to it because you talked a little bit about what you agreed with me on the Disney ending. So the other thing I want to add for you, and that kind of leads into the next question as well. Did Book get off too easy?
Oh, no.
But
no.
Answer the first question, but I want to tie that in to moving into the next question.
Yeah. You guys have said it, Hayley. Absolutely. We don't need a Dylan. We don't need a villain. But I feel like the point that we didn't have a villain is exactly the message that this entire season is talking about. And when you're talking about that connective tissue, I feel like that every single episode had some form, and yes, it could have been the small moments for you, but a form of communication, grief, and loss. And that in the end, we are communicating. We're breaking down that communication. We're communicating with the 10C. And what are we communicating? We're communicating our loss. And that message of, oh, I thought you were a villain. You're trying to destroy me. How you could be nothing but a villain. But when you get down to it, if you communicate, like that's the social commentary that is happening, and they did it in every single character. And so you may complain, oh, I've seen it here. I've seen grief and loss. Everyone is grieving. Everyone can't communicate. Tarina and Saru, they don't know how to communicate. They're aliens. How are they going to find love? All of that tied in together. That's the point. We don't have to have a villain. Like, how mind-blowing is that? What if in our lives we didn't have villains? So I feel like that's the message. And with Book, yeah, he either should have stayed dead, as I said before. But I think his sentence is very, very fitting because as what's her name? Rillick said, the reasons matter. And that's what justice is.
Good points. One last thing here. Got to ask you guys, we had a big guest star in this episode. Stacey Abrams, the 2018 Democratic nominee for the governor of Georgia and self-described huge Star Trek fan, was the president of Earth in this episode, guys. It's interesting to obviously see with our political climate what the reactions have been on social media, but outside of the political range, was this a surprise for you guys to see this? And did you like that they included this guest star, Kevin?
I know this woman very well. I voted for her. I was living in Georgia at the time when she was running for office, and I liked her a lot, and I followed her, and I was actually a supporter of her. And I remember because she was the Democratic nominee at the 2018 Georgia governor election, and she lost the election to candidate Brian Kemp, but she refused to concede. And there's a whole stuff going on about her accusing Kemp of engaging in voter suppression, and that was a big deal in Georgia at the time because of the way ads were being done. I don't want to get too political in that everything, but I was a big fan of her and the stuff that she did. So I didn't know she was a Star Trek fan, which I thought was really, really cool. But it was nice to see her come on there and play that type of role.
Hayley, what about you? What did you think?
No, so I knew simply just because I briefly got on social media and it was spoiled. But again, like I feel like if I had spoilers for Discovery, I wasn't really caring. But it's really cool. And as I love to say, Star Trek fans are everywhere. So you go in and you just think, well, they're just a Star Trek fan. They're just like me. Everyone's a Star Trek fan. So I thought that was really cool. I think she did a really good job. It's really interesting. And I love, can we just say that there was a woman as president?
I just want to say, by the way, in December, she mentioned in December 2021, she said she was going to run for governor again in 2022. So just want to let you know, she's being busy.
Amy?
Yeah, I didn't know, and I wasn't on social media, so I didn't know who it was. And then I was like, oh, what is this? So I had to go look her up and stuff. But I was talking with my mom, and I'm just going to say what she said. She was like, I recognize her. And then it was like, what is she doing? And so contrary, Hayley, my mom thought that she didn't do a good job. And I'm like, Mom, she's not an actress. She's a politician. Give her a break. She's like, well, she just looked like she was really stiff. And I said, well, yeah, wouldn't you be as president of the So it was funny. I had to laugh, but wonderful, perfect. And I've been seeing out on the Twitterverse, like, anything that Star Trek can do to piss off Ted Cruz, then that's a good thing in my book.
What about you, John? I mean, and that last statement, pretty much would sum up me. I mean, it was a bit of stunt casting, but it was fun stunt casting, deliberately done to get to get Twitter tweeting, and some people gnashing their teeth and some people applauding. It was one of those moments where you go, okay, we know exactly what, why it was done and how it was done. But yeah, it was perfectly good. And every word that she actually, you can't really have a criticism of the character, because she said, if you don't agree with what she was saying, I want to know why you don't believe all these things, which are fairly profound. Yeah, it was a bit of stunt casting, and there are going to be people who say it was partisan. They'll get over it, because as you say, if you can piss off Ted Cruz, it's a job well done.
Okay, before we wrap up Discovery 2, Hayley.
Yeah, no, just before we go, because we didn't really talk about it, and I was going to mention it. Did anybody else get War of the World vibes when we finally got to see like all the 10C? Just saying.
Yeah.
That's a good point. Yeah.
And also, I feel like Tig Notaro, Jet Reno, is a cat person.
Oh.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I think she's a cat person.
She should get her own show. I mean, basically,
Yeah, very much so.
I've been watching. Yeah, that's all she's done this season.
John, I am with you 100%. I'm the biggest Tig fan, and I love Jet Reno. I wish she would have her own show or be on all the time.
Yeah.
I can't get enough of her.
Perfect. Just everything.
Before we close out our discussion on Discovery, Kevin, though, there's a couple important pieces of trivia we really need to hit up because there were some great dedications in this episode of Discovery.
Oh, yeah. First of all, and I caught this, and I thought this was really cool. There's a USS Yelchin that is mentioned as one of the ships, a possible nod to actor Anton Yelchin, who played Chekhov in Star Trek and Star Trek Into Darkness, and he tragically died in 2016. Also, following a closing shot of Earth, the words "For April with Love" appear on the screen as it fades to black. According to Chad Rubel's Twitter account, the dedication was in memory of April Nosifora, forgive me if I'm mispronouncing that, who ran the post-production department for the show until her passing in December. She was also a supervising producer on Star Trek Picard's first season.
Now, Amy, there was a couple other ships that gave some tributes as well in this episode of Discovery.
Yes. And when I was on the cruise, Kenneth Mitchell was there, and we asked him, well, many people asked him, are we going to see you in Star Trek Discovery season 4? And he just smiled and nodded his head. And so there was the mention of Mitchell, and that was confirmed by
the USS Mitchell. That was so cool.
Yeah, that was for Kenneth Mitchell. So
there was also the USS Nog.
Yes.
Yep. That's
so
right.
we had that, but it was a interesting season for Star Trek Discovery. Season 5 looks to be coming in sometime in 2023, but it's been fun to talk about everything with this season and with this season finale, but we're not done yet. We're going to take a quick break, tell you what else is going on around the Fandom Podcast Network. And when we come back, it's time to talk a little Picard and of course more with our special guest too, Mr. John Mosby. But for now, here's what's happening on the Fandom Podcast Network.
Thank you for listening. We hope you're enjoying this podcast. We'd like to continue to feed your ears by inviting you to listen to these other great shows on the Fandom Podcast Network. It starts with our flagship show, Culture Clash, discussing the latest in entertainment pop culture. Bloody Kings, Immortals Take Notice, our show covering the entire Highlander universe. Couch Potato Theaters, where we celebrate our favorite movies. Time Warp, the Fandom Flashback podcast discussing a year in movies and our favorite retro movie and TV pop culture topics. Good Evening, discussing all things Alfred Hitchcock. Union Federation, our Star Trek and Orville show. Hair Metal, the 80s and early 90s rock metal podcast. Type 40, our show covering the time-traveling Doctor Who universe with host Dan Hadley. Lethal Mullet, an 80s and 90s action film podcast with host Adam P. O'Brien. Also, check out the Lethal Mullet Network for more great podcasts. What a Piece of Junk, a Star Wars podcast with hosts Scott, Derek, and Nathan. Making Treks, a Star Trek podcast, a deep dive into the final frontier with host Mark Newbold and Adam P. O'Brien. And check out our newest shows, The Fandom Show, our monthly Fandom Podcast Network live YouTube exclusive show about the month's hottest topics in fandom, and the FPN True Believers MCU podcast, discussing the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the related Marvel television and streaming MCU universe, including the connections to the original Marvel comics. You can find the Fandom Podcast Network on several platforms. Please subscribe to the Fandom Podcast Network YouTube channel to receive notifications of new podcast episodes and live events. You can enjoy all of the Fandom Podcast Network audio podcasts on our master feed at fpnet.podbean.com. The Fandom Podcast Network is on all major podcast platforms, including Apple Podcast and iTunes. You can find the Fandom Podcast Network on Facebook. You can email us at fandompodcastnetwork@gmail.com. You can also find the Fandom Podcast Network on Instagram at Fandom Podcast Network and on Twitter at FanPod Network. Thank you for listening, and remember, respect others and enjoy your fandom.
And we're back, and hopefully you're enjoying everything that's going on around the Fandom Podcast Network as we strive to feed your ears with some hopefully entertaining podcasts. But you know what? We have recharged that dilithium chamber. It's time to once again warp out to talk some Star Trek Picard Season 2. Okay, and we are here to talk about Picard Season 2, Episode 3, Assimilation, which came out also on Thursday, March 17th. Mr. Reitzel, would you care to add to the Admiral's log this week?
Oh, yes. This sounds like fun. Let's do this. All right. Hold on a sec here. All right. Seven distracts the magistrate long enough for the group to overpower and kill him and his officers. The ship comes under attack, and the Queen takes advantage of the situation to directly connect herself to the ship's computers. She destroys their pursuers and slingshots the ship around the sun, creating a wormhole to 2024 Los Angeles, where Picard and his crew must find the Watcher. Who knows what Q changed to cause the new timeline? The ship crashes on 2024 Earth outside of Los Angeles, or what Picard says is home. The Borg Queen diverts all power, including from the medical bay, to sustain herself. Elnor dies of his wounds, and Raffi angrily blames Picard before departing with Seven and Rios to start searching for the Watcher in Los Angeles. Rios' transporter malfunctions, and he's knocked out, waking up in a clinic that secretly treats undocumented immigrants. Before he can leave, immigration officers raid the clinic and arrest both Rios and his physician, Teresa. Rios' communicator is left behind. Despite Picard's warning, Agnes connects her mind to the Borg Queen and learns the exact location of the Watcher before she can be assimilated, impressing the Queen. Now, did he crash into his vineyard and knock out a bunch of early wine? That's what I was kind of wondering. That was kind of a little vague there, but anyway, I had to mention that.
Yeah. So, once again, an episode of Picard where a lot is happening. So I want to get everybody's first impressions. You know what, Amy? I'm going to let you kick things off on Picard. She's giving me that look.
Why, Kyle? No,
Well,
I'm not going to. No.
Hayley, would you care to step up to the plate?
Of course. This episode came and went, and I was like, wait, it's done? No, I think it was, again, in comparison. So I watched both episodes today. I had a bunch of teenagers in my apartment yesterday for several hours. So needless to say, so I watched both of them today. And so watching back to back, it's interesting how cohesive everything is in Picard for an episode and a season that's just as short as Discovery. And it's incredible the differences in the storytelling. Everything meshes well together. And I really enjoyed the episode. And all I'm going to have to say is I'm going to have to make a label of shit I stole from the Borg Queen myself.
We need a shirt that says I stole this from the Borg Queen. That's what we need. Kevin, what about you? What were your first thoughts on this episode?
It was a roller coaster. There were some great moments between the characters, especially when Raffi went on the anti-Q monologue with Picard and just seeing her disappointment in leadership. But I thought they missed out on a golden opportunity to shout out Total Recall, because it was Raffi that kills Seven's husband, saying, "You just got divorced." I was excited because you got Star Trek, you got time travel. I was in for the ride, and it was overall, I enjoyed it.
One of my favorite things, in fact, I need to go get some peanut butter, guys. Will you excuse me for a moment? Because I need the real stuff. Rios was awesome in this episode. I loved everything with Rios in this episode. I thought it was just classic. But again, you see the difference, even in Picard, where last week felt a little bit slower because they were introducing you to this new dystopian timeline. And this episode, everything was just bang, 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 hitting you with all cylinders. Now, I want to address the little elephant in the room of the phaser injury that Elnor had, where everybody else seems to be on kill. However, I think I can give you a fix for that. I think that was the magistrate's phaser, who he might not have been set on kill, because if he shot his wife, maybe he didn't want to kill her. So maybe that's because it was the magistrate who shot Elnor. So just want to throw that little correction in there on that, something I had observed. But Amy, it's okay. You're not going to hide anymore. It's your turn.
Okay. Okay. First reactions, meh. And so that's why I wanted to listen to you guys so I could, get my excitement going up. I absolutely love the character moments and each of them. Like, I love the Rio story and how cute are Raffi and Seven pretending to, capture an image. Very cute. And Girardi and the Queen, like, oh, I love it. But the story, meh. That's where I'm at. Cause I'm like, and I said it last week, we've done this before. We have been to the past to fix the present. What did you miss First Contact? I'm just saying, like Borg, time travel.
They did that in Voyager too.
Yeah, and so I love the characters, love. I'm still not meh with the story.
Okay, wait. I have a theory on this. I think Amy was so spoiled by all the math in last week's Discovery that she's been ruined.
That is very true. And it is a criticism of Paramount Plus or whoever decided, who in the heck, why do we have to have duplicate when there's 52 weeks in a year and we're streaming? It is unnecessary because, I'm riding the Discovery high. And then I get Picard where it's like, this same old time travel story, meh.
Okay, John. We once again we're going to dive more into your review here from Echo Chamber here shortly. But give us your first thoughts as you came out of this episode of Picard.
It's the flip factor for me on that. Picard shouldn't work. I mean, if I was as cynical as some people think I am, I would be going. Picard is the one that's cherry picking all the best moments from Star Trek, and whenever you cherry pick moments, invariably you often aren't as good as the original that you're paying homage to. But this is the exception. For me, it is cherry picking. You can absolutely argue that almost every element has been done before in Star Trek and has been done really well. But when it's been done this well, and every one of those elements is being done well, even if it's not wholly original, I'm in. There's nothing I hate in Picard. There are things, there are niggles every so often, but the performances are so good. Some of the decisions in this episode regarding directing and acting are so clever in some ways. I mean, you had Doug Arniokoski doing the first two episodes. You got Lee Thompson now doing this one. So far, 3 for 3 for me. I think it feels like everybody cares. It feels like somebody's really looked at the script and said, we're not going to do this until we've got a really good, tight script. Yes, there's a familiarity side to it. Yes, it's the best of all worlds of Star Trek, but it's doing it really well. And when something's firing all cylinders like this, I don't know whether it's going to last out as good for the full run. But 3 for 3 so far, and that was not what I expected to be saying about Picard, to be honest.
Well, on that note, we're going to transport into our away missions for Picard. Now, Kevin, since we're in Picard now, it's time to continue your special assignment, assuming you are not too creeped out by Borg Queen walking around on her hands.
Yeah, a little creepy, I guess there. But man, is she fun to watch though? I mean, it's she steals her scenes. It's she does a pretty good job there. But John, back to your article. You did an article on Echo Chamber talking about this one. You just touched on it about cherry picking certain things and to a certain degree making them work. The one thing I wanted to ask you is you mentioned here in your article, it's an homage without being overt reverence, and also without it appearing to be lightweight and opportunistic, mere lip service or fan service, as some people might call it. I see Amy's point though, because we have done this before, and even Picard himself mentions how Kirk was like, let's use this slingshot maneuver. He made it work, and they were able to do the same thing. where is the balance with, you know, retreading, do it again, like Amy's concerns are, and that's valid. It really is, without stepping on this negative lip service thing. Amy, you want to say something?
And can I just add a question to that? Like, I feel like you like what's being done in Picard, so that's why it's okay, but you don't like what's doing in Discovery, because when I hear you talk, I'm like, they're doing exactly that, what you said about Picard.
It's weird, and that's a valid observation. And I've said to various people this week, it's interesting that both shows are acknowledging the mythology, the stuff that's gone before. For me, with Discovery, it's mentioning people's names in starships. It's almost like Easter eggs that are just put in. Weirdly, with Picard, which, as I say, I expected when I kind of saw the trailer to go, oh, I'm going to enjoy bits of this, but the story is probably going to be so much of a retread, I'm not going to like it. But the performances are so good. The connective tissue, it feels like, yes, it's cherry picking and fan service to what's gone before, but it's not just repeating the scenes. Yes, the 2024 stuff. It's going to be very interesting to see if they can prolong that without getting so much that people are going to say it's not as good as The Voyage Home. But when you have not just moments, but sequences and scenes that are consistently good for me by the actors, Alison Pill was a revelation this episode for me. And she's a bit of a Marmite actress. I've liked everything she's in, but she has the capability to play characters who are frankly annoying, and it's just, it's thankfully down to her that she makes them interesting. When I used to watch The Newsroom, I loved her in The Newsroom and things like that, but it was always like I could see how if I met this person, this character in real life, I'd probably last about 10 minutes before going, oh, they were fun for 10 minutes, but they're really annoying now. But this, when you have moments like this, when you have Raffi, tearing Picard a new one, what I think is really telling about this season of Picard so far, and what I think is quite a brave maneuver, is that Picard is the name of the show, but he's not the hero. In fact, finally, he's a character that's been held to account by everybody else. He's made some iffy decisions in the first season. It's his show. It's Patrick Stewart, who's an enormously talented actor, but I think it's very brave of him and everybody connected with the show to say, this is an ensemble show, and he is not necessarily the white knight riding in, the above everything that he was in The Next Generation, where he was the stoic guy. He's flawed, and I like that. And in Discovery, I don't find it as deep in Discovery. I find it, again, fan service and lip service. People moved around to where they want to need them. Picard, people have to earn that move. I think that the story may have a problem over the whole run by the time we're talking about it, maybe at the end of the season. But so far, it's beat, and every beat has been fun. And some scenes and some of those beats have been really tragic, and some of them have been funny. And it manages to set, for some reason, it's individual, but it managed to segue between the two effortlessly. And that's watching Discovery, then watching Picard. I'm sorry, it's the opposite for me. I watch Discovery and feel like I can see somebody writing a script, and I watch Picard and I feel like I'm watching somebody give a performance. And that's for me, that's just the difference. And it's individual taste, I think.
Hayley, you had some thoughts.
Well, yeah, to bounce off a little bit of what John is saying, I think with, Discovery, we look at this, we take these two episodes and you put them next to each other. Discovery says, oh, we're going to kill, with air quotes, this character that you guys have seen. Oh, but he's not actually dead. And then you look at Picard, this episode, Elnor's dead. Like, they took that risk as to where, Kevin, Amy, you both agreed that or Kyle and Amy, you both agreed that they Disneyed the last episode of Discovery, where yes, Tarka died, but he's not like a character. Yeah, we've had him most of the season, but he's not one that we've grown to love because we all thought he was a douche. And so, they took that risk with Picard and saying Elnor's dead. And not all the characters kind of seem to come across as one note. Not everybody's afraid, or not everybody's scared, or not everybody's mad or sad. They're all a combination of it. I do think that there's this degree of we are comfortable. Outside of Rios and Girardi, we and Raffi, we are comfortable with two of these characters, right? And we know them and we know who they are. And so I think that really kind of lends to it as well, because it has that sense of familiarity. But I do think that there is a degree somehow with the writing that the characters are fleshed out. Like, we know who Rios is. Like, we knew who he was shortly after we met him. And I think Discovery's still been lacking in this fleshing out the characters to such a level so quickly that you enjoy watching it, but you don't have that deep sense of enjoyment as you do with Picard. And I think it really just kind of comes down to that writing. So that's
I think all very valid points, Hayley. Now, Kevin, you have anything you want to bounce off of what John said? And you have to leave your phaser behind, by the way.
No, I see where John's coming from. Definitely. I mean, I think the one point, though, that John said, the one word that he said was fun. And I'm not trying to say that that Discovery is not fun, but there's something that I'm getting out of Picard that is more fun, I guess, and I had made the comment previously in Discovery that I felt like sometimes, when I'm watching it, I feel like it's almost like a job at times, and I'm trying to figure out why that is. But it's Star Trek, I want to try to watch all Star Trek and enjoy all Star Trek. But I have to realize, too, that with so much more coming out, just like in Star Wars, you're going to finally find stuff that you like more than others and, not as much as others. But and the other thing, too, that I think that John made a good point on was that Picard is not this hero necessarily, this person that we've had on this pedestal for so long. He's a very flawed character. And I find that fascinating because they have a wonderful cast too that is really getting its moments around Picard, and in Raffi's case, in his face.
You bring up an interesting point too, and it make Kevin, as far as Picard not being this white knight and perfect thing, and I'm kind of wondering if that's maybe not part of the angle they're maybe trying to finally play up with Q a little bit here too, when he talks about Picard's penance, maybe Picard's own ego, whether he has it be or not, he doesn't see himself as this flawed character, and so maybe it's Q trying to humanize Picard a little bit more and make him see his own flaws, and that's why he's doing this season. That's just thoughts hearing you guys talk. But Amy, you've been listening in, taking notes while we've been talking about this. Has your changed a little bit, or given some ideas that you may have not thought of?
Yeah, definitely with the ensemble. And Kevin, you've been podcasting. We joke about who's on the bridge crew. We don't know. We still don't know. I'm
on Discovery. Yeah.
On Discovery. It's like, who are they? We still don't know. And with Picard, we get this ensemble, and yes, absolutely. I love it. And Patrick Stewart isn't the big lead. Remember the movies, it's the Picard and Data show, right? That's what it went to. And I love seeing this step back where I agree with you, John. Like, Picard is a secondary character because every one of these stories I am riveted to. Annie Wershing playing the Queen. Oh my gosh, chilling. I said it last week, but that interaction between everyone, Picard and the Borg, Girardi and the Borg Queen. And how interesting was it when she got assimilated and we got to her rooms of emotion? Like, here's the counselor, Amy Nelson, coming out. Like, she's knocking on the door, and the emotion that she had and was able to switch. And when she got to the sorrow and the pain, oh my gosh, it was chilling. And I feel like every one of these stories is so good. I just want the overall. So I'm hoping that we will get going where I want to care. But the stories, yeah, Girardi, Queen, she's killing it. All of them.
Well, okay, so we've had a lot of discussion about the ensemble. So I have 3 quick questions to hit involving our ensemble cast. You guys give me some short answers on that. Elnor is dead, but is he really? And I'm going back to last week when I said they're punking out Elnor. And now they've killed him. So I'm actually going to start with you on this, John, because you have a long history with TV and movies and everything like that. Is Elnor dead, or are we just playing it? Oh, he's going to be back once we fix the timeline.
Well, that's interesting. We have quite a large cast. Not too large. Again, Discovery, I think, has too big a cast. We've got just the right size cast, but we have a lot of moving parts. And I think what they've done is removed some of the moving parts, at least for the moment, to let other characters breathe. Does that mean it's going to be restored later? I don't know. My first reaction was, well, of course. But it might not be till the final episode. But the very fact that Raffi brings it up almost immediately makes me think, well, that's maybe what the audience are thinking. So maybe they're not. Maybe this is one of those times when things actually have consequences, where characters, are written out, and it's not necessarily in big heroic fashion, they're collateral damage. In some ways, it would be a nice statement if he wasn't. I have no problem with it happening at some point. I expect it to happen before the season end, or at the season end. But I would not be hugely surprised if it doesn't happen, because I don't think it's necessary. It's going to be interesting to see how some of the characters that played a big part last season, who have only had brief mentions or cameos this season, to see whether they just not been included and will be cameos, or whether they will play a bigger part down the line. So the answer to your question is, I don't know. I think it worked well. Okay, he was fridged, but it produced some good scenes. So we'll see. So far, I think he sold the death scene. I think everybody sold it. So either way, if that's the last that we see of him, all you can ask for is a good death scene.
Haley, you got some looks going on over there, and I think you're biting your lip a little. So
no, no, it's more of thinking about it and thinking through things and timelines and time and everything else. And it's more of, if we take our cast here, they have been plucked from their timeline by Q, placed in this other timeline, and they know not to mess with things because it could mess with the future, which would be their future, which was them. They could end up dying if they screw things up and not ever existing in the first place. I think, and I, to be with John, I would be surprised if he does come back, because I think he actually is dead. Our characters have been plucked from far, far distant future, put in this timeline. They've gone back in time to fix so they don't end up back over here where Q put them. And so I think the consequences of stuff happening, if stuff happens to our characters, it is going to happen to them, because they are essentially like in their own little bubble. They're interacting with the time, but they are in their own bubble because of what Q did. And so I think this is going to be a consequence of that.
Kevin?
Could be wrong.
Wow. It's interesting because and maybe it's a product of watching Picard and Discovery on the same day or back to back, depending on however you have time for it. and seeing how they handled I thought Book was dead because it had an emotional scene that we got with Burnham. I'm like, wow, is Picard gonna try and do that too? Because when I thought time travel, I'm like, no, they're gonna bring him back because they're gonna come back in a different time thing. But then when I saw the scene and how you guys are mentioning that there should be some type of costs regarding this, and whatever Q is alluding to, I think it would be fine if they killed him off. But then Hayley, you realize that you just reminded me, like, oh, wait a minute, there's this other timeline they're in right now. So now I don't know. But I hope that if they do bring him back, there's still some type of cost attached to it, whether someone else sacrifices or something, because I mean, when you can sell a good death scene, like, this scene that we're talking about here, and the emotion that Raffi went, put into it, or I mean, the actress Michelle Hurd went into it, is amazing. And I don't want that to be taken away, I guess, so to speak. Unless they do it in a very cool Star Trek-y way that maybe we don't see coming, but I don't know. I'm now Hayley, you took away everything. I was just like, let's keep them dead. But now you mentioned the other timeline, like, okay, they could get around it that way.
No, but see, here's the thing, though, is if you look at it, Q plucked them from their time and put them in this other time, but in their same shoes.
Yeah.
So essentially, if they die, it's not these other characters, these other versions of themselves are somewhere else, potentially, right? Q could be holding them, but that's their Elnor, not our crew's Elnor. And so by doing that, it is eliminated that possibility of him being taken back, even if they fix time, which, let's just go with it, they're going to fix it, right? And get to the future that they are used to, that they need to get back to. Elnor is still going to be gone because they're in this little bubble right here. And it's a consequence of what has happened. They could take this Elnor over here, but he's not going to be their Elnor.
Okay, it's getting wibbly wobbly, timey wimey here. So
I'm trying
Amy,
to explain the science. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Amy, I did real quick on this because we just talked about it earlier, the Disneyfying with Book. Do you think Picard's going to pull the opposite? But we have Q involved, so really anything's up for grabs at this point.
Q's involved. This whole thing is fake. It's not real. Q's involved. When has there ever been a consequence?
Well, there we go.
Excellent point.
No.
Excellent point.
So Elnor, he's going to come back. End of story. He will. It's going to happen because this reality is a thing of Picard. And I love, Hayley, that you did the two fists. Like, here we are, and then we're here. Because, no, seriously, because this is where we are. And if they are removing them and putting them into this confederation, then who's left over there? That means time would have to stop. Right? Or when they come back, I mean, are they really taken from that timeline? I don't know. But in my mind, this is a Q fabrication. It's going to work out in the end. So, and I'm sorry, I'm listening to you, and I was not convinced of the emotion of Elnor's death. I didn't feel it from Michelle Hurd. I was like, oh, he died. Next. I really think it is because of that Discovery high. Because I didn't see what you guys saw with the emotional delivery of Elnor's death.
Can I just say, it's interesting as well that this is not quite the end of Picard. We know there's going to be one final season after this. I think I might have a slightly different opinion about how final things were if this was the last run, because so far it's feeling like an excellent bookend to the story of Picard. If this was the final season proper of Picard, I would half expect Picard to die at the end of it, to give his life for and have that not come back like William Shatner, to die. But of course, we have another season to go. So I don't know whether it will be how satisfying it will be in the long run. I think there's a lot of elements still to come in this season that have been touched upon so far that we tend to put to one side because we're dealing with the main story. Maybe it won't be as satisfying. I don't know, but it would be interesting to see where they intend to leave Picard when they leave Picard.
So 2 other quick things as far as our crew real quick. So just give me quick answers. Everybody give me one favorite moment of Seven, Raffi, and Rios out doing their own version of the voyage home in modern day Los Angeles. Because like I said, everything with Rios in this was great. I love the fact that he's like, this is real peanut butter. I mean, and you think about it, because all they've had is probably replicated food for the most part. So it was a great reaction. Kevin, I know you're a big fan of the voyage home. Was there moments in this? What were the moments that stood out that maybe grabbed you?
Someone mentioned earlier about seeing Raffi and Seven wanting to go up to that area, and Raffi was saying it's a picture, not a still image. But why is there always a Kevin?
Yeah, and why are we
always a Kevin, and it's not necessarily like a good thing.
It's
like
not
a
handsome guy like you.
It's like thrown. It's like a Kevin is like thrown out there as like that other guy. So I thought that was funny, but I just like the fact that Raffi knows how to field strip a 20th century weapon and then mug the guy back. I thought that was great. That the whole scenes there between Raffi and Seven were my favorite, and my favorite line was when the guy says, "I am more fun than Kevin," or whatever it is, and then Seven's surprised that usually people are turned off by me or whatever, and then Raffi goes, "I think you in the 24th century need to get a room."
No, Kevin, look at it this way. At least it wasn't a double dumbass on you.
Yeah, this is true.
What about you, Amy? Any moments that kind of with that voyage home kind of feel to it?
Oh, well, no, I'm going all woman power. Yes, thank you. I would love to be Raffi, to walk through a bad part of town in LA and feel confident that I could handle whatever happens. Like that scene was empowering to me. And then when Seven gets beamed down and the kid's like, "Are you a superhero?" And she's like, "Shh, can you keep a secret?" Okay. That brought in for me all the Wonder Woman and Marvel, like she's a superhero now. And that just, amazing. Love it.
Hayley?
Girl power.
I loved all of it. Obviously, I think my biggest thing was, of course, the 3 of them were not going to land together. Although I was a little bit like, wait, is Seven in the rundown RV and is Rios in the truck? Because that would be funny, because that's happened before. I do have to pause it though and question you guys. If Rios, our characters have only probably ever had like replicated food for the most part, how would they know what real peanut butter tastes like? And to know the difference, right? Like, I'm really intrigued by this thought of he knows what. Anyway, but no, I love Rios. His character is just so fun. But I felt so bad for him. But I think the best part was, and I can relate to this, of your doctor asking you a favorite memory and distracting you by having you tell them something fun while they relocate your shoulder, which was me, or in his case, his finger. And that was hilarious because I saw that coming so hard. It was great.
Now, John, you weren't a classical guitar player in another life, were you?
Not in any life or any continuity or any alternate reality am I allowed anywhere near a musical instrument.
Was there any good moments for you in this little homage to the voyage home?
It would be so easy just to be so simply a homage to it, and it is in many ways. You can't you can't pull it too far back. It's clearly going to be compared from everything that was happening, and it's largely played for fun, quite rightly, partly to balance out the more tragic and dark stuff that's happening elsewhere. An old narrative trick is make somebody laugh so that you can make them cry, or cry and make them laugh. And I think that worked very well. But amidst all the fun, there was that nice little moment, and it's just been referred to as well, where Raffi is sort of looking at Seven, and Raffi's gone through this tragedy of saying this whole thing is worthless. This is pointless. We should be back where we are. And she's noticing that Seven, for all of that, she's wandering around without the implants. She's been recognized. She's been respected. And there is that element of that Seven actually is kind of liking it, and it's an interesting way to play it, because you just had a very dark scene, and Raffi, is still a little bit emotionally raw, but she's finding the humor in it, and it's a nice segue in the writing, in the performance, and in the direction that says, yes, we can move into that, because we have to quickly move on to what we're doing. The character has to quickly move on. So yeah, there is that fun, those one-liners. It allows the audience to breathe out and have a smile without losing a little bit of the pathos and the tension that they've just had. So yeah, a perfect balance, I think, on that.
Okay, lastly, as far as our crew goes, Amy, you actually hit on this a little earlier. Are we really sure we want Dr. Girardi assimilating with the Borg Queen? Is that really a wise decision?
Listen, I was talking to my mom about it, and she threw something in my mind. Like, what if she goes and turns to the dark side? Sorry to cross the streams, but I can see that. And sort of with the previews, they show a preview on the Ready Room, and Girardi has had from season 1 the traumatic experience with the Romulan, with Commander O, and not the best of relationships, not the best at communicating, and that where she was with the Queen in the rooms of emotions, that I'm calling it, like the Queen is getting to know her. And now she knows the Queen. And yeah, she was able to steal from the Queen and still have the upper hand. But is that going to last? I just don't know. I'm very curious, because there is that question, this tug and pull, like when Picard's like, whose hand is this? Mine, 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 mine. This literal tug and pull, I'm very curious about.
John, you brought up how great Alison Pill is an actress. I've been a fan of her since Scott Pilgrim versus the World. I loved her in the Newsroom too. This might have been one of her best performances in this episode.
Absolutely. I mean, and I think I'm not sure how much stage work she's done. Clearly, Patrick Stewart's done an awful lot. I would suspect she's done a lot of stage work, because this is up close and personal. The camera is there. And in a lot of TV shows, you can tell sometimes when an actor is used to television cameras rather than having that sort of up close and personal moments. And she sold it to me as somebody who knows how to do stage work. Just little inflections, just little movements of her head or eyes. The idea that they were going to have this sequence where she tries to join with the Borg Queen, I'm kind of shouting no at the screen. There's no way that Picard would let her do this after all the stuff we had with the Best of Both Worlds and Locutus. He would actively say, you are not doing it. And I'm thinking, okay, so it's going to, hopefully they won't. Then they do, and they make the superb choice of not showing anything going on in their heads. It's all down to the actors. In most shows, you'd immediately gone to this kind of ethereal imagery, askew. It'd be, the visual effects department would have earned their money. They'd have been nominated for an award for the sequence. And they said, no, what we're going to do is we're just going to focus on the faces. We're going to focus on the conversations. And the way Alison Pill sells that, I'm going from room to room. And Picard's very, trying to be reassuring, and she just turns around and goes, pretentious prick. And just like the whole audience is going, oh my, oh, what? It's stellar. It should be one of those things that's nominated for an award of some kind. She is that good. I didn't expect it. And I didn't necessarily like the idea of it happening, but they absolutely brilliantly sold it. She sold it. I could watch some of those sequences again and again. It's an acting, not masterclass, but it is just the nuances that are in there. But I do take Emmy's point as well. It's going to be very interesting to see. She stole something from the Borg Queen, if the Borg Queen has stolen something from her, because I get the feeling that there probably is going to be a quid pro quo in this. And I'm pretty much convinced now that Alison Pill can pull that off. That scene, just when talking about mine, that reminded me a little bit of the Doctor Who episode when they're stuck in the shuttle and they're doing the words, if you remember. Just that where you're not sure who's in control at any point. And it takes a lot. I bet that was rehearsed the hell out of every scene. And perfect. I mean, that really was the quintessential moment in the episode for me.
Now, Kevin, if you're told by the Borg Queen that you've impressed her, are you scared?
Okay. So the way that delivery was done, I love how it turned into one of the biggest threats, even though in a way it could be done as a compliment. But the best thing about that scene, and I'm glad John brought this up earlier and just elaborated on that now, is that Girardi, Alison Pill, needs something like this, because the question is Dr. Girardi really the last person to be playing mind games with the Borg Queen, or is she? And I say yes, because it would be nice that whenever there's a threat with the Borg going further or any type of relationship, we don't always have to rely on Locutus/Q knowing what to do or say, because he's the guy that's been in their mind. He's fought against us. He's fought, whatever. I think it's time that we have somebody who is obviously a genius at what she does, whether she has her own, behavioral quirks or not. I think it's great that she is standing up to the Queen and being able to go back and forth. I think there's someone else that needs to also be to the table and somewhat have an equal, back and forth with someone as powerful and manipulative as the Borg Queen, other than Picard. And I think she is the perfect person to do it.
Yeah, I think you have some good points there. But Hayley, what about you? Because I know, especially with some of your background, this had to have been very intriguing how this kind of played out.
Yeah, it definitely was. I found it at first. I was like John. I was sitting there going like, "No, seriously? Yes, Picard, don't let her do that." But I also understood why he couldn't, just because of his past and knowing what had happened to him. And so, you're left. What do? You can't repair this creature, let's say, without going in. But I was screaming, just like, don't do it. As far as like the emotions go, this is really quite interesting. In psychology, we teach, we learn that men typically are the ones who will put things in boxes mentally. They'll box this thing over here and this thing over here, and only those types of things go in that box. So an anger emotion goes in the anger box and that kind of stuff. And so it was nice to see her kind of talk about, okay, my emotions, and they're behind doors, because people do put their emotions behind doors. And, where I work, counselors, they're the ones who are knocking. They're the Borg Queen knocking on the door, trying to get somebody to open up, not to invade those emotions like the Borg Queen does and use them against them. Although clients can't think that a counselor is going to use their emotions against them, or someone who works with them, in my case. It was really interesting to see that aspect of her kind of being forced to open that door and let those out. And I think that was really empowering for her. And hopefully going forward, it's not going to be something that the writers say, okay, we're going to violate that and use that against her, but use that for her going forward and to create her confidence and give her self-esteem. And I just love that she stole that information from the Borg Queen, because none of the other crew would have been able to think of doing that. And again, I want to make a folder on my computer that says the very same thing.
Very, very interesting points, guys. I know we're running long, but there's one very important question we need to deal with before we exit out of this episode of Union Federation. It's just very important. Doc, are you telling me you made a Picard episode with Leah Thompson? Leah Thompson was our director for this episode. I was rather surprised about this. I went and looked up her IMDb. She has been doing more directing of late, including episodes of Resident Alien with Alan Tudyk, Stargirl, and the Goldbergs. But were you guys caught off guard by this? And I mean, really, if you're gonna have somebody direct time travel episodes, who better than Leah Thompson, Kevin Reitzel?
Oh my God, yes. I didn't catch it when I was watching it. It wasn't until my friend Johnny K from Chaotic Studios put a post out there. I'm like, oh my God, that is so cool. And like you did, I was like, what else has she done? And I'm so happy that she's been doing this. Had no idea. And it's just so funny how we're dealing with time travel. Who else are you going to get?
Amy, were you shocked by this one?
Yeah, and it makes me wonder, like, how did she even know? Did she approach them or did they approach her? I want the backstory. I want to know, how did we end up with Leah Thompson in our fandom? She's ours and we're going to take her, and she better be coming to conventions. That's all I want. I need to see her.
Hayley?
No, I thought it was really cool. And I mean, it's hard. I don't follow stuff like this. So to know that, this is not her first venture in directing is really kind of cool. I like that a lot of actors have turned to that. I think it's really awesome.
That is very cool. John, for me, when I think of Leah Thompson too, more recently, there was an episode of that Muppets Tonight show that she did a couple of years ago before that got canceled, where a certain frog might have had a fantasy about being in an elevator with Leah Thompson. I'm just saying I might have to kick the frog out for that one. But what were you surprised? Did you know about this going in, or were you surprised by this too?
I'd seen an article about 24-48 hours before saying that she was the director. And I just thought, oh, that's great. I didn't know she was a director. But there's a lot of as you say, that performers that have been they're going in. Leslie Hope has been doing a lot of Snowpiercer, and she's obviously known for 24 NCIS and a whole variety of shows. So there's a lot of people working their way, up and sideways through the business. But I think Picard this season particularly has really had some top-notch direction. Doug Arniakowski did the first two. Leah Thompson's done this one, and I believe the next one as well. So there are some quite clearly talented people who love Star Trek, who are involved and are bringing not just a reverence to it, but something that says, I'm not going to be overtly reverential. I know what works, but let's try this. Again, the stuff with Alison Pill, I'm not sure if that was a directorial decision or whether it was a writing decision, but it was a great decision. I love the fact that the directing, the writing, the acting, and the pacing are all coming together. I'd say 3 for 3 at the moment. We'll see how it goes, but so far, I mean, she's done a stellar job on this one. Doug did a stellar job on the last two. It's great to have that kind of consistent quality.
Yeah, no, I think she did a phenomenal job with the episode. Guys, before we go to, I have one final question. Who's the Watcher? Or what is the Watcher? Do we have any speculation?
Can I just bring up that it's funny that we're looking for the Watcher, and the Watcher is something that John and I know very, very well, but in another fandom called Highlander, where the Watchers are humans who actually know about the secret immortals. So I get a little funny tickle about that. I'm sure you do too, John.
Yeah, it's Watchers in Buffy, in Highlander, in Marvel. I mean, I did this cartoon for somebody just at the end of last year for Christmas, where you have Rupert Giles, Uatu the Watcher, standing in the bar, and Henry Cavill comes in and goes, "I'm sorry, obviously, clearly there's been a typo." Think about that one. But it's the fact is Watchers all over the place at the moment, and witches occasionally too.
Yeah, no, they're everywhere. But okay, Amy, any thoughts? Who or what might the Watcher be?
Guinan.
Yeah, that would be an interesting twist. Hayley?
Well, hold on real quick. Amy, I love that. I think that's great.
I'm really shocked. I thought everyone thought Guinan was the Watcher.
I never thought of that. You know what else?
I don't know how that would work. But I like it. I mean, I've heard that. I like that idea, but I'm not sure how the timeline.
Why do you think it wouldn't work? I mean, what is the Watcher supposed to do? Be wise?
Oh no.
Okay.
Only depending on what Guinan we're talking about, she wouldn't know Picard. She didn't know Picard in the movies.
She was in the Time Zero 1800s with Samuel Clemens.
Well, she knew she was in Generations too, right?
Yeah,
she was in
Generations. That's one thing. I just didn't know. I didn't feel like she would. I don't know how it would fit in with how she knows.
She's
Picard,
already on Earth, man.
Yeah,
she's already there.
They make her.
They
Can do enough.
What if she's like an evil version?
Don't go there.
Sorry, Hayley. Sorry, I got in your way there.
No, it's all good. Zach also thinks it's Guinan. Because we knew that Whoopi was joining the show this season. I don't know yet. I'm slightly intrigued, and this might seem just a tad crazy, but in the last episode, there was a statue of Soong or Data.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so my brain goes, I wonder if there's like a early Soong.
Yes.
That could be it. But it's interesting because we're looking at, and it makes you think, okay, this watcher is watching to phrase it, watching for something, right? It's watching for signals, it's watching for things. And so the watcher has to know, which would mean that this sequence of events has potentially happened before, right? So that they're going back because obviously the first time or however many times around Q has done this, it hasn't worked and it hasn't fixed the future. So the watcher could be somebody who has been there before and is aware. So it could be somebody completely different. I'm going to throw out that it's one of Geordie LaForge's ancestors. I don't know, because I got nothing else. Because Guinan makes sense to a degree, but then I'm like, I don't know. It could be somebody else, just to completely throw us off.
Brent Spiner has talked about being in it, and I know we heard him, as you say, and saw him briefly in that episode. But there's in the previous episode. But I would expect him to be in it more. I would expect Whoopi Goldberg to be in it more. But there's so many things that. I mean, the whole thing about Picard's answer, maybe his parents had an abusive marriage that was just dropped in. I can't believe that's not going anywhere. So there's so many things that were 3 episodes in that need to be addressed that are being dangled. That it could be anything or anybody at this point. But I like the Whoopi Goldberg angle. I think that's the most likely. But I have no idea really.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of interesting ways to go. I wouldn't be surprised if it wasn't Guinan myself, too. Now that Amy brings that up, it makes a lot of sense. But so does Brent Spiner.
Didn't think about that.
Yeah. So does Brent Spiner. So I think we got one of 2 ways to go here. But you know what? We've run long again, guys. It's hard when you have the finale of Discovery and a great Picard episode and an amazing guest here as part of the crew. Kevin, I'm getting a message from my subspace signals that John is now going to be reassigned. You have to escort him to the USS Cerritos.
Yeah, we'll take you to lower deck sometime, John.
First of all, thank you, of course, to the amazing crew of the Union Federation, Amy, Hayley, Kevin, always bringing such amazing insights and great thoughts and opinions. And John, as always, it's a pleasure to have you on any show on the Fandom Podcast Network.
Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure.
And with that, let's just open up a few quick subspace signals. So just real quick, remember you can subscribe to the Fandom Podcast Network on YouTube. Just go to YouTube, search for Fandom Podcast Network, give us a like, subscribe, and give us a share. You can find, of course, all the great podcasts of the Fandom Podcast Network on our master feed at fpnet.podbean.com or on all major podcast catchers, including Apple Podcasts, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and, of course, the Podbean app as well. Visit our great TeePublic store for all kinds of great gear, teepublic.com. Search for the Fandom Podcast Network. If you want to contact us directly, you can hail us on email at theunionfederation@gmail.com. You can find me, Kyle, on social media under Twitter at AKyleW or on Instagram at AKyleFandom. Kevin, where are you at on socials?
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Spartan_Phoenix.
And Hayley, where can people find you and your great tips for proper phaser shooting?
You can find me on Twitter. I am at Trekkie01D and also in our Facebook group.
And Amy, besides conquering the airwaves with all your different podcasts, where can people find you on social media?
Well, that would be Galaxy Class, talking nothing but Next Generation, all good things, sort of all Star Trek. I am on Twitter at Miss Amy Nelson, and of course in our Facebook group.
And of course, our special guest, John Mosby. First and foremost, go to Amazon if you need to know anything about Highlander, Fearful Symmetry. It's got everything you need to know. And of course, look for his great reviews on Echo Chamber. Where can people find you on social media, John?
Social media on Twitter, it's There Goes the Day. My reviews on echochamber.online. Facebook, it's normally just me, John Mosby. I'm like the bad penny. I just keep turning up.
Yeah, we tend to share some of his reviews on the Fandom Podcast Network Facebook page too, because we like him so much. So you can find some of them there too. So, guys, it's been a great episode. Looking ahead with the Orb of Prophecy, obviously we continue our march with season 2 of Star Trek Picard. And the countdown is really coming on, guys. We're not that far from Strange New Worlds, and we're not that far from the Orville. And yay! I know we're excited about that. Kevin is already, I think, just kind of getting his Orville blazer set up.
I can't wait.
His captain's chair ready.
So excited for the Orville.
Hey, did you know that Mission Log has an Orville show now?
Yes, actually, I've been listening,
and I'm like getting so pumped. I can't wait to talk about it.
John, real quick, are you interested in Orville coming out?
I've hardly seen any episodes. Again, it's one of the ones I hear nothing but great things about, but it's on the pile of things that I've got to get to at some point.
Definitely get on Hulu and check it out, John, because it's got a lot of great TNG vibes to it and such. And I think my left leg is going back nicely, guys. So we're going to be good there. Of course, too, we've got Prodigy returning later in the year as well as Lower Decks. But it's been a fun episode again, thanks to our special guest, John Mosby. It's been a blast. We'll be back next time. We're also on the countdown to Kevin's wedding. We're really excited about that, too. So we're 1 month away, about a month away. So
what's that, John?
I said, who's more funner than Kevin?
No one is more fun than Kevin.
Well, I might say Aaron is more fun than Kevin, but you know,
that's a true story.
With that, until next time, hailing frequencies are now closed.